Alright, today, dogs have already eaten, so they're just hanging out. Somebody said we needed to introduce them. I've introduced them in a couple of previous videos, but this is Beta. Hi, Beta. Say hi. And this is Saturn. I actually rescued her outside of where I work. Somebody dumped her or something when she was a puppy. She was about 6 months old, so we rescued her and brought her home. Hi, Saturn. Say hi. Good girl. Okay, Miss Speedy is 3 weeks from the competition, right?
Yep, 3 weeks out.
You got abs? Let's see some abs.
Oh, you don't want to see my abs?
No
I
abs?
might scare you.
Let's see. Abs. Yep. Still on 1,000 calories a day?
Yep.
And you live your life, what, one container of food at a time? Let's see what you got.
Yeah, this is one day.
So here's the
right
fridge.
here.
One container at a time. So this is her life right now. Only 1,000 calories a day, but man, it's a bunch of containers. Fills the fridge up. Hey, what's up everybody? Welcome back to Speedy's Garage. I'm gonna jump right into it. We've gotten the 500 break-in miles on the new motor in Go Man Go, the new Demon/Redeye engine. Just a little bit over 500. So now we can start getting on a little bit, and I need to dial the tune in. I'm gonna tune the car myself, obviously with Mike from OST Dyno's supervision, but he has been teaching me how to tune these things, and I think I've got the hang of it. There's several steps I'm gonna do to be extra safe, since this is kind of my first foray into full-on tuning. And I'm gonna start with a base tune that he sent me, and then I'm gonna dial the car in. When I get it to where I think it should be, I'm gonna send the final revision of the tune to Mike and a data log for him to review and make sure that he gives it the thumbs up. So there's 5 or 6 steps, like I said, so stick around. I'm gonna show you how I get it done. And as a reminder, again, this is a Demon/Redeye engine. You know, we broke the original engine that was in the car, but to remind you of the modifications, we've got a 272 Hellraiser pulley, and we've got ID 1000 injectors in the car. We're gonna do this tune on 93 octane. That's what we're gonna set the car up to run. That's what I have locally. If you only can get 91 octane, if you're somewhere like out west, California, something like that, you probably wanna not go to a 272. The smallest I would recommend would be a 285, but since I have 93 octane, we're gonna be just fine with the 272. The hardest part about dialing in one of these cars is getting the knock sensors set correctly. I've asked and done a lot of question asking to several people who tune these cars, Mike from OST being one of them that I've talked to a bunch. And the knock sensors on these cars aren't the best. They're kind of dumb, for lack of a better term. You got a knock sensor on each side of the engine, but there's 8 knock sensor setting tables in the tune, one for each cylinder, plus a knock window setting. The knock window has to do with when the knock sensors listen for knock based on where the crank angle. And there's a window set up in there. If you compare a Demon factory tune with the Demon crate tune, you'll see that Dodge narrowed the window. 48 is what it was set to in the Demon regular PCM, and in the crate PCM it's set to 42. So it's listening in a narrower window. And I guess Dodge felt like it might pick up some false knock outside of that, and if you're having 100 octane in the tank, they know that that would be false. So you can adjust that. The other thing you can adjust are the knock sensor voltage thresholds, and what that basically acts as is a filter. And so the knock sensors are a 0 to 5 volt sensor, and 0 means there's no knock, and 5 volts means there's a whole bunch. And based on how many volts the knock sensor sees, and based on which cylinder it's coming from, because I think they set those knock sensors up like a little microphone, and they're listening to frequencies, and it's able to determine, or they're trying to make it determine, based on the frequency, which cylinder is the knock coming from, and then it'll know it needs to dial the timing back. And some cylinders are more sensitive than others, apparently, because the voltage settings are quite different between the cylinders. So, and I'll show you all this in a minute. But the trickiest part is when you change supercharger pulleys. Now the supercharger is making more noise, and some of the noise frequencies overlap with the sound that knock makes, and the knock sensors start going off inadvertently. And I will determine that based on this car. What we're gonna do is we're gonna start by raising the octane. I've got some Renegade race fuel. It's 112 plus octane. I'm gonna run the car down, or I have run the car down where there's only a couple of gallons of 93 left in the tank. I'm gonna pour in 5 gallons of this 112. And the octane, my goal, I'll go online and find a calculator to determine exactly how much to add, but my goal is to get it between 101 and 105 octane, somewhere around in there. At 101 to 105 octane, you know you're not gonna get any knock unless you just go stupid crazy with the timing, and even then you still might not. So bring the octane level up. That's the first thing we're gonna do. And to better demonstrate how the knock sensors work, pretend that this is a voltage scale. We'll put 0 here, we'll put 5 volts up here. And let's say from the factory, they've got the filter set at about 1 volt. And so anything below 1 volt, the car ignores. It doesn't set the knock sensors off. If the knock sensor sees anything above 1 volt, and remember this is per cylinder, so you might have 1, 2, 3, 4, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And each one, this one, cylinder 1 might be 1 volt, cylinder 2 might be 1.2 volts, across the board. And it will ignore anything below 1 volt. Well, then you put the pulley on. Well, now the pulley's making noise up here. So what's going to happen is the knock sensors are just going to constantly pull timing. And if you pull too much timing, that's just as bad on the engine as too much. And so what we need to do is we need to figure out with our new pulley, our Hellraiser 272, where does the new threshold need to be? So then we're going to raise basically the filter, and we're going to tell it, okay, instead of 1 volt, maybe it's 1.5 volts. So anything below that, ignore. And that way, and we'll do that with the race fuel. So when we get the race gas in there, we'll be able to filter out where the noise is. And then if we see any knock, we know it's real knock and not false and not just noise from the supercharger. So that's why we're doing it this way. And of course, we're going to use HP tuners to tune the car. So I've gone ahead and loaded that up and got it connected to Go Man Go. We're going to load up our first revision. I did some videos on that a while back. I'll try to link to them there so you can go back if you're curious how you do this. It's very, very easy. You basically grab the tune you want. Select if you want to write the transmission and the engine. We only need to write the engine in this case because the transmission is already set. Again, we're going to set it to about 6,400 RPM shift points, and it'll overshoot that just a little bit, but it should never go over 6,500. And everybody I've talked to, especially considering this is the Demon Redeye engine that comes from the factory, set up at I think 6,300 is where the shift point is in the actual tune itself on the Redeye. But we're going to set ours to 64, and we should be good to go. So we're just going to write the calibration on the engine now. Takes a couple of seconds. There we go. So I'm going to start by richening the air fuel a bit. So I'm going to bring it down to like 11.2, 11.3, which is richer than you would normally tune one to, I think. I want to make sure we got plenty of fuel. And then I'm lowering the timing. So I've got good gas in the car. We know we're about 105, 104 octane. We are going to lower the timing where I know it won't be a problem on the amount of boost we're making. We're seeing about 16 pounds of boost. It's a 85-ish, 80 degree day. So we're seeing about 16 pounds of boost in that type of air. So I've got an idea of what I think timing is safe for that. And I based it on a factory Redeye tune. I went and looked at a factory Redeye tune and kind of looked at what they had done. I compared it to the Demon tune and talked to Mike, and so I've kind of got a base timing. I'm not going to tell you exactly how much because every car is different, and I don't want to give people a number to go and try to put in their car and they end up having a problem. But we've reduced the timing. It's single digit, I'll tell you that. It's pretty low, and we've got the air fuel enriched. Now I'm going to go make a wide open throttle pull with the race gas in the car. I've got the knock sensors set just like they are from the factory, and I'm going to see how much knock I get. Based on previous testing when the car was bone stock, I would get 4 to 5 degrees of knock retard. Bone stock on 93 octane. So you know that's false knock probably. There's no way it was banging away. And it was, it was right around 4,000 RPMs. It seemed it would want to do that. And it would spike way up and then slowly trickle down. And the way the cars are set up is they have what's called a knock multiplier. So when the voltages, like I talked about earlier, when they hit the threshold, the knock multiplier comes in and just jumps on the ignition advance and pulls timing out very, very quickly. And that's a good thing. You want to keep the car safe. Unfortunately, because of the pulley and some of the sounds the car makes, it's too aggressive. And so, again, if you let it pull out all the timing, that's just as bad as too much because when you pull the timing out, the cylinder temperatures go way up, and that's how you burn spark plugs, just like if you had too much timing. So we've, again, enriching the air-fuel ratios. We got plenty of fuel. We've dialed the timing back, so we know we're good, and we've put really good gas in the car, so we know we shouldn't get any knock. We're going to go make a pull, see where the knock is, and then we'll start working with the filtering to try to get that to go away. So now we just need to go data log. I've got the laptop connected up with HP Tuner's VCM scanner. I'm testing to make sure when I hit record I do get all of the PIDs, and I do. So we're ready to rock and roll. We're gonna go run a log. Okay, so I'm gonna go up to my test track and make a couple of pulls. What I'm gonna do is I'm gonna start in like third gear and just make a quick pull take a look at things. If they look good, I'll make another pull, probably farther up in the RPM range. I'm gonna make sure that I go through the 4,000 RPM range, because on this particular car, and I've asked some other tuners as well. So like I said, I've talked to a bunch of people, folks that I trust, particularly Mike from OST Dyno, like I've said a couple of times, but also Kurt from DusterhoffTuning.com. He's been really, really helpful, by the way. He's let me text him, and I called him a couple of times. He's been about 15 or 20 minutes answering questions as well. I always like to kind of get a couple of opinions, and what I'm finding is when you start tuning a car, it's kind of like painting a painting. The tools are the paintbrush and the paint, but the way the artist does the paint, or the painting itself, can be different. And so there's probably 10 or 15 different ways to accomplish the same thing in one of these tunes. And so Mike has been the one training me, so I'm going to use his methodologies to get the car squared away. Okay, here goes our first test. We got the laptop recording. Get it down into gear. Actually quite a bit of power, to be honest, right around 4,000 RPM. So I need to check the data log, and then we'll start making some adjustments. Okay, looking at the data log, it pulled a ton of timing. Now remember, we've got the timing dialed way back, we've got the air fuel on the rich side, and we've got around 104, 105 octane in the tank. And I'll show you, here's the data log I just pulled, and you can see it pulled a tremendous amount of timing, and that ain't good. So that means that we're definitely getting some false knock. And now I'm going to go into the tune and start adjusting the knock sensors based on what Mike has taught me. Okay, so with those adjustments made, we're going to load the tune back in the car and basically just rinse and repeat. We're going to go make another pull. We'll review the data log, and we'll just keep adjusting things until we get not all of the short-term knock gone. I'm going to try to get it down to where it's around a degree or maybe half a degree. That way I know the knock sensors are there and listening. It's probably still, even with the 105 octane in the tank, false knock, but I want to know where they are, that they're not completely desensitized. And then we'll dilute the 105 octane back down to like 100, and then we'll drop it down to 97, and then we'll drop it down to 95, slowly adding 93 octane fuel to the tank and doing some tests so that I can lower the octane gradually and then watch the knock retard and see if any of it comes back. If it does, then we know we're getting real knock, and we'll need to adjust the tune in that spot. With the timing that's in the car now, I would be very surprised to see any short-term knock retard. Like I said, it's pretty much single digits, so it's pretty low, very, very safe and conservative. Once I get the knock sensors set where I'm comfortable with where they are, then I'll start adding a little bit of timing and retest, and then a little bit more and retest. By a little bit, I mean like 1 degree. And I'll just add a degree until I get to where I think it ought to be. Then I'll cross-check with Mike, probably bounce it off of Kurt from DusterhoffTuning.com as well, and then we'll be good to go. Okay, here we go. We're queued up for another one, and I'm keeping an eye on the performance gauges, page 2, which includes the intake air temperature. There is a table in the tune that as intake air temperature goes up, it reduces timing slightly. So I've got that set up as well. I've got it set like I want it, but keep in mind that can skew your results a little bit in your data log, because if you're commanding, let's say, 9 or 10 degrees of timing, and the IAT is 135 or 140, and the table you've got set up is removing a little bit of timing because of IAT, you might actually only see 8 or 9 degrees of timing in your data log. And what you need to go and look at is the PID called IAT Advance. And so don't let that skew your results. If you're data logging, it is related to timing, and it will take a little bit out. It's not knock retard or anything like that, it's just temperature based. So we're gonna make another little pull here, see how we did. Okay, so I think I got it after, it took me about 5 data logs to get the knock sensors set where I feel pretty good about them. I want to send that to Mike and kind of get his thumbs up on it. The next step will be to dilute the 105 octane that's in the tank down to about 97. So I'll calculate that, figure out how much 93 I need to put in the tank to get it down to 97 octane. And then I'll start testing again and make sure the knock sensors don't do anything odd. Once that passes, the next thing I will do is dilute the fuel a little bit further, get it very close to 93, probably 94, maybe 95, and test one more time. If everything looks good, then I will start adding just a little bit of timing, maybe 1 degree, because right now it's super low. So I'll add like 1 degree and then I'll test. And I'll see if I see any short-term knock retard. I'll add another degree and then I'll test. And when I get the timing set where I think it should be, I want to get to the point where I'll see just a half a degree of short-term knock retard in maybe 1 or 2 places. That way I know the sensors are right there on that edge where they need to be, where they're listening and they're picking up real knock, but they're not overdoing it. And I'll know I'm not putting too much timing in the car for the boost and the fuel I have available, which will be 93 octane. So the final thing I will do after I get all of that set is I will start backing down the, we'll call it lambda, but it's really the air-fuel ratio that you see on your dash. I'll start leaning it up a little bit because right now I've got it running like an 11.2. The gauge is saying 11.2, 11.3. Nothing wrong with that. I just don't want to run it quite that rich. I'll probably drop it back on my street tune between somewhere 11.4 to 11.6. From the factory, they're 11.9 to 12.0. The difference is there's a table in the tune called cat overtemp protection, and Dodge brings it in very early and very heavily. And so if you watch your air fuel gauge when you're going and making a run, by the time you get to 3rd gear, you'll start to see that air fuel ratio drop, especially if it's warm out. What the car does is it goes to a fueling table and it adds additional fuel to cool the catalytic converters off, and it dumps the fuel in. I've seen mine go as low as like 10.3 or 10.4, and that's just way too rich. So from the factory, they dump a lot of fuel. They dump it early with cat overtemp. I've turned it off. I've turned cat overtemp off in my tune, so I'll probably richen it up a little bit more than factory. I don't want to run it 11.9 or 12.0 since I'm not taking advantage of that cat overtemp. I'll probably run it, like I say, between 11.4 and 11.6. Now, technically, if you want to get really fancy, I guess you could go into the cat overtemp protection table and allow it to still add some fuel, but a lot less than they have it set to from the factory. And so you could actually use that as another area to modify the tune and modify the fueling. That gets a little complex. I'd rather know the fuel I'm commanding is the fuel I'm getting, rather than, well, is it the fuel I'm commanding and is it cat overtemp and I'm not sure. You'd have to data log that, and that's just kind of a hassle. So I'll run it a little bit richer than factory on 93 octane. And once we get this wrapped up, we'll start looking at a race tune. But right now, we're going to head back to the shop, look at this data much more closely, shoot an email over to Mike, see what he says. And you guys know with this 272 pulley on here, it makes quite a bit more boost than factory. And what I was noticing is that part throttle, it would make quite a bit of boost and not be in power enrichment yet, which means wide open throttle. So something Mike helped me figure out is, or he did it actually, I asked him, I said, is there a way to enrichen it with boost? And so he made a tweak, and as you can see now, even at part throttle, I'm going to ease into the throttle. So that was about half throttle, and as you saw, the air-fuel ratio just drops and enriches nicely. It's not too much, it's just enough. So when you start making, 10, 11 pounds of boost at part throttle, I felt it was better to richen that up a little bit, and Mike was able to make it happen. Okay, so we're back at the shop. I looked over the data logs thoroughly. I shot those off to Mike for his review along with a copy of my tune. He has emailed me back already. I had a little bit of lunch. It's been a couple of hours. He emailed me back with a couple of suggestions. I have made those, and so now we're going to go up to the gas station and put some 93 in the tank to slowly lower that octane level, run a couple of more data logs. It's just rinse and repeat. It's been a couple of days and I've run a ton of data logs. I've analyzed them, spent many hours pouring through them line by line. Probably could have gotten there a lot quicker if I had tested or tuned one of these cars before, but this is my very first one, so I'm being super, super careful. I've had to call Mike and he's given me some really good instruction, and I feel pretty comfortable with what I've got now. I hope this is what's going to be our final 93 octane race tune. We're gonna load it up in Go Man Go make a couple of pulls, see how we did, but I bet this is it. know you got it right when it surprises you. Wow. And I forgot to mention, usually when you're dialing a car in like this, you would pull the spark plug or two out, or maybe all of them, and just take a look and see where the heat range is showing up on the spark plug. It'll be really obvious. Make sure they look healthy. Make sure there's no glitter on the ceramic, which would indicate there was some knock. Unfortunately, with the Hellcat, I can only get to like one spark plug. The rest of them, it's a pretty involved job to change the spark plugs on this thing, so it's just not practical in this car. So I was just super conservative in the tune as a result of that. So keep that in mind if you're tuning your own car. If you can get to the spark plugs, definitely pull some out and check them. So now we got our street tune dialed in. I did exactly like I said. I put 103, 105 octane in the tank, worked with the knock sensors until I didn't get any knock, and I figured 105 octane in the tank, you're not going to get any. We had single digit timing. Then I slowly lowered the octane, leaving that single digit timing in the timing map, and just slowly bringing the octane down by mixing in some 93 until we were all 93 octane. At that point, I checked for short-term knock as I did that, so I ran a bunch of data logs actually, and then I started gradually adjusting the timing map for the 93 octane and getting it set up where I would get just a blip of short-term knock retard in a couple of places, like maybe a half a degree, and that tells me that those knock sensors are right there where they need to be at that threshold where they're ignoring false knock, the sounds of the supercharger and all of that, but they're actually going to react to any real knock that we might get. I then set up the IAT table, that's the intake air temperature timing table, so that the intake air temperature as it goes up, it takes a little bit of timing out, and I've tested that thoroughly. We've had some cool days and some hot days, so that's all good to go. And the last thing I did was I started dialing in the fueling. And that was a little bit more tricky than I expected. The Hellcat has wideband all the time, which means even at wide open throttle, it's reading the widebands. And so you take the stoic point, which is 0.0722 for the Hellcat, and then you add power enrichment to that. And I want mine to be around 11.5 most of the way through the RPM range. And then as I get in the upper RPM, 64, 6500, I want that to drop down to 11.3, maybe 11.4, just to give me a little bit of extra fuel up top where it's really kind of getting after it. And so it took a few tries to get that right, but I've got it now. And so we are good to go on our street tune. The next thing I'll be looking at is a race tune. And with that, we'll turn off some of the nannies because we're going to know we're going to have very, very good fuel in the tank. We don't have to worry about those IAT modifiers anymore. I might lean the fueling up just a little bit to go with that race gas. And then we can obviously add some timing, which is going to be where our power will come from. So Mike has been kind of training me, for lack of a better term, how to tune these cars. And he's spent a couple of 30-minute sessions on the phone with me going over various things, and he's taught me a ton. The biggest thing that was kind of an epiphany for me as I was dialing in the fuel table was air charge does not equal boost, and for some reason I just always assumed it did because the P ratio table and the air charge table kind of look the same, but it's not the same measurement. P ratio is boost, but in the tune you can tell the car which sensor to use, and from the factory they use the air charge sensor, so that's what I stuck with. And I think that has more to do with how much airflow is going through the motor rather than the pressure going into it. So we got that figured out, and that was kind of an epiphany, is what I'm trying to say. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, be sure to give it a thumbs up. There'll be more like it. I've had several questions about tuning, and now that we've got HP tuners, we can go take a look at some of this stuff, and I can share with you guys as I learn. Check us out on Instagram if you haven't already. It's at Speedies_garage, as well as our website, www.speediesgarage.net, and hopefully I'll see you out there.